Welcome to the Journey of Gratitude podcast, hosted by Tri Robinson and Ruben Navarrete.
So my question is, tell me a little bit about the metaphor that you use in this book about the seasons, because the topic is, or the title is A Journey of Gratitude, Traversing the Four Seasons of Life. Mm-hmm. So tell me a little bit about that.
Well, first of all, I didn't set out to divide the book into four seasons. Mm-hmm. That's something that kind of came along. It was kind of an epiphany as I started writing. The defining those four seasons as I wrote became clear that they really were distinctive, and then it made sense to me. And I look back now, I look at it and I recognize, like, not everybody gets to live the complete human experience, like they don't make all four seasons, for one reason or another. But some people are fortunate enough that they can and do. I have been. And I, first of all, realized, and I think the thing was, I realized I was in a definite, as I was writing the book, I was in the winter season of my life, and I realized that. Like, this is the last season, in a way.
Maybe.
Yeah. But I also realized that I could see the metaphor was so perfect. People talk about all of this season or that season, but I realized there really are, in many ways, in my mind, very clear definition of these four seasons. The first season is the spring, and spring is the time of rapid growth. It's a time where a seed is birthed, and it gives life and it grows, and it's kind of random. At first you can't even, like when you see young plants, it's hard to define what they're going to look like when they grow up, in a way. You don't know what they're going to actually become. They're just this green shoots in many cases. And so life sort of starts like that. It's just this random, fragile thing. But it grows, and in the spring is just this kind of like undefined time, but a rapid growth. And in my mind, it's the time of like craziness and adventure and youthfulness and just discovery of the world, and yourself. And so the spring is really, I see that like the springtime of my life was wild and crazy. There's no question about it. I start the book in my teens, late teens, but really the whole, that's the end of the spring season. Mm-hmm. But it really is a time before your life is really defined, in a lot of ways. It's a time of really discovering what you're gonna be, in a sense, when you reach this place of maturity, but not knowing,
Right, and so you go through the book, and the book is divided, of course, by chapters, but then it's also got sections which are defined by the four seasons that we know of, and it does a really good job of kind of encapsulating those periods in your life that are usually maybe decades or a little bit more than a decade. It's a whole phase of life. And do you ever see, or is it something in hindsight that you recognize when those begin to change?
Yeah, in hindsight, you do. Sometimes you don't realize it when you're doing it, but looking back, so spring turns to summer, right? And summer, to me, was the time, it was kind of a time of toil. It was a time of work. It was a time of, watering and, plowing and weeding and, and in the human experience, it's kind of like that time where you're an adult, but you're still working on it, And so it is a time of work. You're learning how, in my case, in many people's cases, it's a time to learn how to stay married. It's learn how to be responsible, have a job that's, where you can be a breadwinner, and it's, and a time of raising kids. I mean, it's all work.
It is. What I think is interesting about that is, you come out of a time of spring, new growth, all that, as you kind of come through your teen years and maybe into your college years, and then you become an adult, and then you're in this summer period of time. And one of the things that I've realized, and I'm really coming to the end of the summer in my life, pushing 60, I'm 58 now.
No, you're definitely in the end of summer.
Yeah, I'm definitely in the summer, but not.
No, in the end of it.
In the end of summer, yeah, exactly. I'm at the end of summer. But like in natural life, how summer goes so fast. And before you realize it's over, I'm realizing, wow, that went fast.
Yeah. Well, it all goes fast actually. When you hit the winter session.
Yeah, I guess so.
You're going. I think, like, all of a sudden people are.
Everyone's
grass is drying around you, and you're just going like, wow, this is getting close. And you realize. They say life is like a roll of toilet paper. The more you use, the faster it goes.
Yeah, that's really true.
And that really is true when you get towards the end of this journey. But the fall is the time of productivity. That's where I see you. It's a time of great productivity. It's like all the labor, all the work, all of the gifting, all of the, training, all of the schooling, whatever it was. Now it's all of a sudden being used to produce something. Mm-hmm. That's producing new, fruit.
Right, and you don't have the anxiety, the fear, or all the insecurities that we talked about in the spring of your life. Mm-hmm. They're gone.
Yeah.
Because you've learned how to navigate in a certain way. Not that you have it perfect by the time you kind of hit the fall season when you're kind of in the harvest. Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at right now, kind of entering into that. As my son, he's a senior in high school, and that came later for me because he...
Your family came later.
I think we had Evan when I was 40. So that really kind of stretched out the summer of my life, which has been nice. Because all of my friends who have young kids are all younger than me. And it has kept me young. It kept me having to be fit and all of that. But the question I have is, after you went through that, you might have had one motive when you started writing the book. And was there a transition? What were your motives for writing the book, and did they change over time?
Yeah, it's funny. Okay, the kind of the beginning of this project started with my kids one day coming up for a meal. I can't remember what. We're all sitting around the dining room table by the wood stove, the kitchen, the cook stove. Mm-hmm. We're all sitting there, and my old friend Pat Armstrong, who's a big character in the book, he transforms all four seasons of my life and influences all four seasons of my life, because he enters in the spring of my life, but he's still with me. He's like, I talked to him yesterday, 81, amazing guy, but.
You're not that far behind that.
He's an old guy, yeah. But he's an amazing person, see. Uh-huh. And he and I had these crazy, wild adventures, both flying adventures, but also mountaineering and backcountry experiences. And we just had all these stories to tell. Mm-hmm. And he's a great storyteller, and he's got a lot of humor. And we're sitting around the table, and we start telling stories, and my kids are there. And we're laughing, and it's like we're telling stories they hadn't heard before. Yeah. They're getting a little older, so we're allowed to tell them some stories I didn't tell them. But Pat has been in their life their whole life. Yeah. He's been like an uncle to them their whole life, and showed up at various times. We've worked in the backcountry together, and everything, and so one of my kids, I can't remember which one, said, "Dad, you've got to write these stories down because we want our kids to know these stories." Yeah. And that put that in my mind. So initially, it was kind of like the book was going to be about my relationship with this guy, this just good friend, because it's a lot of humor. There's a lot of humor in it because there was a lot of craziness in it, lots of near-death experiences. Yeah. And so that's how it kind of started, and that was my initial motive. But then as I started writing, I realized I was writing about my life and what was important to me and my memories. And initially, I had a lot of trouble with the chronicling things in the right order. And so there was a lot of old friends in college and throughout my life that I would actually send manuscripts to, pieces, and say, is this the way you remember it? Because I want this accurate. I don't want this just to be my fantasy. I want this to really be an accurate story of what really happened, because some of it was almost unbelievable. That's when I decided to put pictures in the book, because I wanted to document the stuff that it actually did happen, you know? And so that's kind of how it started. But then I just realized that every season was unique in itself.
What do you hope people come away from the book with? What is your hope that, because obviously you write a book and you publish it for a wider audience. And so aside from people learning about your story,
Right.
what is it that you want them to walk away with?
Yeah, it's what I call a memoir, but a memoir with a purpose. I want it to be enjoyable. I think it's an entertaining book in many ways. But I call it a memoir with a purpose because I think there is purpose in it. I want people, as I use my life as an example, that they might reflect on their life and see where they are in it, you know, and see where they could go. And also see the miracle of life. Like in the book, there's some major full circles where I realized at the time, initially, when certain things happened, I thought it was just, you know, I didn't think about it. But later in life, I looked back and I go, that was not a coincidence. That connected to something later in my life that was very important, you know? And so, you know, like I was telling you earlier, that I get overwhelmed sometimes because the title, A Journey of Gratitude, came late in the book when I realized the one thing I was feeling more than anything else was this deep sense of gratitude for the opportunity to live, to have life, to have an experience on this earth, to have people in my life that were so meaningful and important, you know, and rich, you know, and the experiences of, especially the experiences in the wilderness and things that I know that my grandkids aren't even going to be able to probably experience. Like, as you know, Idaho has completely changed. But when I came in the 60s, you know, I was a 17-year-old kid, and the whole entire population of Idaho at that time was less than 1 million people. It was like 800 and some thousand people. Boise, which is this massive city now, was 40,000 people. I mean, the whole valley was just, you know, and so it was a raw, open, wild land, you know, and the hunting and fishing and mountain climbing and the flying and the wild horses and the, you know, just the beauty and the magnificence. I go, gosh, you know, I feel so incredibly blessed I got to see all that.
On the cover of the book, it shows you and Nancy standing by the chapel that you built on your property here, but it also shows a picture of the plane, your J3 Cub, which we'll hear more about in this series. Why did you choose that for the cover?
Well, that because it was one of the full circles. Yeah, at the end of the spring of my life season, which is the section 1 of this book, I meet Nancy. She's 18. And, you know, I'll tell the story later, but I met her at a keg party on Lake Lowell. And I was flying up with my airplane. I was throwing rolls of toilet paper, bombing this keg party on Lake Lowell, which you couldn't do today. You get thrown in prison. But anyway, that's kind of the wild, crazy, you know, of all that, you know, but I land my plane, I drive out to Lake Lowell, and there's a bonfire and all these college kids, and she's a freshman, I'm a senior, and I see her across the fire. And so I know, I knew right then I was going to be a really special person in my life, you know. And so I invited her to go flying with me the next day. Now, she just saw how I flew.
Wow, yeah.
So you got to say, not too many girls ever, I can't remember ever taking any other girl flying in college, which is amazing because
Yeah.
before I met her, I don't think they had the guts to do it
Mm-hmm.
because they knew me, you
Yeah.
know. And but I took her out to the airport, old airstrip. It was actually a crop duster strip off just at the edge of the Boise River. We flew out. It's funny too. I go up and I did a loop right off the bat. And
An upside down loop?
yeah, just like
Wow.
as soon as I get up to altitude,
So it's a first date?
it's a first
A
date.
first date, and you take her out in your J3 Cub, and the first thing you do is a loop.
Yeah, which is really stupid. Which shows me another miracle that she actually didn't tell me to land the plane and let her out. But anyway, we take off, right? I want
Yeah.
to take her on this picnic, and I'd made this sandwich and stuff, and so we're flying east towards the wilderness. But in those days, there's a place. It's about an hour and a half out from Boise. Now it's a pretty developed place, but it was called Garden Valley, and there was nothing there. It was just the river, but there was an airstrip.
There was an airstrip there,
right
yeah.
on the river. So I flew into Garden Valley. It's a beautiful high valley, and landed and had this picnic on the river with her.
That airstrip is right on the river. I've been there. I did a wedding on that airstrip one time.
Yeah, it's a beautiful place.
It is a beautiful airstrip.
Well, in those days, I had no instruments in my plane. And so I would use landmarks all the time. I just always pick out things. Well, there's a butte called Timber Butte, which happens to be this butte right here. And it sticks up. And you can see it for miles away, And I used it always as a landmark when I was going from, towards the wilderness area. And so I always flew right by there. And years later, so we flew right over this property right now that's now Timber Butte Ranch. That's our final resting place, I think.
Yeah.
And years later, we're,
Decades later.
yeah, because we're back in California
Yeah.
and we're doing all that and other stories, a lot of different, and then we come back to Idaho to plant the church here in Boise. And then we were in town. We're planting the church. I have to be close by to go to the hospital in the night and all the other things that a pastor has to do. And I couldn't be in the country. But as the church grew and I got multiple staff, I was free. And Nancy, it was actually her idea to move back to the country. And so she found an ad on a 3x5 card in an old hardware store just outside of Boise that advertised 80 acres up here.
This land that we're on right now.
This land here, raw land.
80 acres.
Yeah, and they described it, and she came to me and said, "I want to see this. I want to see this land." So she calls this number and this guy, and he meets us in his pickup truck at a bridge on the Payette River, about 8 miles from here, and it's a pretty scary road coming up from there. Yeah. And we meet him, and we follow him up this road, real steep cliff on one side, and we're coming up here. And I think she's not going to go for this just because of the drive up the hill. I'm thinking, what would this be like in winter to get here?
Yeah.
Anyway, we finally top out on the top of this canyon that we come out of, and we look to the north, and there's this butte.
There's that butte, yep.
And I'm going, man, that looks so familiar to me. And then it dawns on me, that's the same butte I think the thing that hit me was on my first date with her, we flew right over this property, probably not very high.
Yeah.
Because I never flew very high in those days. And here we are. And on that very knob, that overlooks the ranch, I build this chapel. And it's our intention, who knows what's going to happen, but it's our intention that we'll be, buried there, cremated, and buried together on that knob. And so when I wrote the book, it just hit me at the end. What a full circle it is. That's why it's almost the last paragraph of the book that makes sense of the cover.
Okay, so what do you think the meaning behind that is? What do you think God would be saying about the full circle?
I think that we all experience things that we might think as being happenstance, accidents, coincidences, but I don't think so, you know. And I think we can look back over our life, especially if you've had the privilege of living 4 seasons. You can look back and see the miracles, see how God was on your life,
Yeah.
and you didn't even know it, directing you to a certain place. And I see that all through this book.
And these are like reminders along the way that you're
Little
on the
things.
right path.
Yeah, small things, but in a way, huge things.
Yeah.
Because it just says, you know, God was always there. He always knew. He always knew He knows the beginning and the end, Alpha,
And he
Omega,
knows
right?
the end from the beginning. Yeah.
And it's like, wow, He did. At least in my life, that's for sure.
Yeah. Well, thanks, man. It'll be exciting to get through the book and hear more. Thanks.